seventh month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer the
Wade,
question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from
Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine
Central
what
America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. Prosecuted transnational criminal organizations. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks. Say so we're working there right now, overtime, trying to do their job. Conservative members of the United States. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, will end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on
taking
television
it from the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals.
You also said you would use local police.
Criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries, like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. You know, the crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down. You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worse to come into our country and they're now in the United States and told by their countries, they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in because they've taken their criminals off the streets and they've given them to her except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made. This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worse to come into our country and then now to the United States and told they're destroying the fabric of our country. They didn't include the word anything done like this at all. They destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. Because they've taken their criminals off the streets and they've given them to the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made. This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow.
Elections
to come into our country and then now to the United States
for sexual assault and his
There was a fraud. Millions of people let in because they've taken their criminals off the streets and they've given them to the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made. This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow.
Each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris.
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy, the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as she
We're out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, "We won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote." Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person.
Think big. Or just twice. Think ahead. Or with focus. Think outside the box. Or on your feet. But always remember to think for yourself. We are at your side.
DW News. It was incredibly loud.
This is very difficult. Providing you with free information. DW, made for minds.
Guardians of Truth.
My name is Can Dündar, and I have paid almost every price of being a journalist in a country like Turkey.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran, and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel. Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News.
People in trucks injured while trying to flee the city center.
More and more refugees are being turned away at the border.
Families fleeing bomb attacks in Syria.
Police crackdown in Venezuela against demonstrators.
People fleeing extreme drought.
A raft carrying 200 people has sunk in the Aegean Sea.
Around the world, more than 130 million people are seeking refuge. We ask why? Because no one should have to flee. Make up your own mind. DW. Made for minds. Living in a polarized world. Our society is full of contrasts, and inequality is a big challenge. Many problems can only be solved by working together.
Yes, I think capitalism is slavery.
What is home?
It's a roof over your head, a place to rest, a refuge from the world. It's the most important thing you can have.
How do we tackle the major issues of our time? Let's talk about it.
There is a significant risk of human extinction from advanced AI systems.
Climate change is the new frontier of social inequalities.
Our series continues, Us and Them, this week on DW. Living in a polarized world. Our society is full of contrasts, and inequality is a big challenge. Many problems can only be solved by working together.
Yes, I think capitalism is slavery.
What is home?
It's a roof over your head, a place to rest, a refuge from the world. It's the most important thing you can have.
How do we tackle the major issues of our time? Let's talk about it.
There is a significant risk of human extinction from advanced AI systems.
Climate change is the new frontier of social inequalities.
Our series continues, Us and Them, this week on DW.
People in trucks injured while trying to flee the city center.
More and more refugees are being turned away at the border.
Families fleeing bomb attacks in Syria.
Police crackdown in Venezuela against demonstrators.
People fleeing extreme drought.
A raft carrying 200 people has sunk in the Aegean Sea.
Around the world, more than 130 million people are seeking refuge. We ask why? Because no one should have to flee. Make up your own mind. DW. Made for minds. Living in a polarized world. Our society is full of contrasts, and inequality is a big challenge. Many problems can only be solved by working together.
Yes, I think capitalism is slavery.
What is home?
It's a roof over your head, a place to rest, a refuge from the world. It's the most important thing you can have.
How How do we tackle the major issues of our time? Let's talk about it.
It's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
here... They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I wanted to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban, The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations
thank
with the
you.
Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, 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 and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country, We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to respond
No,
to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Correct. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the...
I've paid almost every price of being a journalist in a country like Turkey.
Taking on the powers that be, they risk everything.
They want to kill me, and they try many times.
Can Dündar asks activists, journalists, and politicians living in exile what drives them.
It's too much on my shoulders, but I have to hold this weight because I'm responsible for the future of our country, for the people who are behind the bars.
The courageous effort against corruption and political crimes. In our series, Guardians of Truth. Watch now on YouTube, DW Documentary.
Yeah.
Think big. Or just twice.
Yeah.
Think ahead.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump is gonna actually lose this debate right here.
Or on your feet.
You know, I literally think Donald Trump is gonna lose this one. It almost feels like I really do. It just seems to me like Kamala is, I mean, I really can't believe that she's punching above her weight and she's like holding her own. So you know, she's holding her own, and it feels like she could win. Right. But she says she has a plan, and she has many plans. But I think Donald Trump's gonna ask her, so why didn't you implement any of those plans for the last 4 years. You know, she hasn't been around for a while. Yeah. Yeah, let me see. So, but it's kind of close. I think the Donald Trump thing has ran its course. He seems pretty strong. You know, he seems pretty strong. But given the factors that she's a woman of color, whether she's black or white. By the way, I love how he dealt with the whole "is she black" thing, because black people are saying she ain't black. You know, Donald Trump really has his pulse on the black community for some reason, more than Kamala that does. You know, so black people are really the ones that's saying she's not black. And the reason is because she is talking about cooking collard greens in the bathtub and stuff like that. And we're like, what? Ain't no way. Ain't no way you're going to cook no collard greens in no bathtub for me. It's no way. Never heard anybody doing that. And if they did, they wouldn't tell it. Wouldn't brag about it. That's how you know she ain't black. But be that as it may, she is a woman of color. And she seems pretty smart right now, honestly. So I'm gonna try to get rid of this station right here and see if I can get another one. It's actually more interesting than I thought it would have been. Yeah. But yeah. I'm gonna say this though. It's better than Hillary. It's better than Hillary. She's less angry than Hillary. You know, she do have a lot more joy than Hillary did. So I do say that. As long as when this commercial break go off, now here we go. Let's get back in.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our
Let's
country.
get back in.
One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes,
Wait, is it
the
over already?
ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the
It's been a
respect
whole
that we
hour
so
and a half,
rightly deserve,
hour 40-something
including
minutes.
respecting our
I'm shocked.
military
That's
and
crazy.
ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
Unburdening
They've had 3.5
from what
years
has
to
been
fix the border. They've had
burdened.
3.5 years to create jobs, and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
You've been watching the ABC News presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris here on DW News. Welcome to you.
That we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats.
The tax cuts she wants to implement to help the middle class and the poorer Americans. Is it enough? Was it consistent enough? Was it big enough to really convince these undecided voters? I'm a little bit skeptical here. I think it was still a little bit too little. Having that said, when Donald Trump was asked about a plan, he said, I don't have a plan. I have an idea and I'm working on my plan. So this is kind of really unfair, but it's also the truth. Many Americans think and they believe that the economy was better under Donald Trump because of his skills and not because it was before COVID.
That's our Washington Bureau Chief, Ines Poll, there for us. Ines, thank you so much for your wrap-up of the debate. We also have double coverage from the debate's watch parties in Philadelphia. DW's Janelle Dumoulin is at a Democratic event and Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber is following the Republican side of things. Now, welcome to you both. I'll start with you, Janelle. Given what Ines has just said, too, I guess there's a clear picture among the Democrats. Obviously, they're going to think Kamala Harris is tonight's winner.
Indeed, yes. So I am at a watch party that was organized by Philadelphia's Democratic Party. It's unfortunately cleared out pretty quickly behind me. But yes, we talked to some people here tonight. For them, obviously, Kamala Harris is the clear winner. But it has to be said that in that first 20 or 30 minutes where Kamala Harris did seem a little rattled, she did seem a little nervous, she did seem unwilling to stray from her more...
They actually thought she was going to prosecute, but let's be honest, she did way worse than I think they thought they would do.
Encourage her, perhaps from afar, but then eventually you could feel that as she got more settled in, as she entered her stride a bit more on the topics where she is very strong, on abortion, on foreign policy, you did get the sense that there was some relief over here. Perhaps from afar, but then eventually you could feel that as she got more settled in, as she entered her stride, the people that I talked to praised her poise and her conciseness. Of course, they are inclined to say that Donald Trump's responses were rambling and at times a little bit crazy. That is what someone here told me today. But essentially, yeah, they did think that Kamala Harris was the clear winner here. But of course, the question would be whether Kamala Harris managed to reach those undecided voters who perhaps were not really represented here tonight.
It was interesting to see Kamala Harris, I guess, get a bit more comfortable with the task at hand. As you say, she did look a little bit rattled to begin with, and then seemed to get a bit more comfortable. Benjamin, over to you. How have Republicans reacted to the debate tonight and the performance by Donald Trump?
To balance their hard work.
There was a lot of applause, especially during Donald Trump's final statement, where he said, why is Kamala Harris promising so much, and why is she not doing it right now?
Oh, you'll notice they let her respond, but now Trump is trying to respond, and all of a sudden we must move on. We absolutely
But of course, the
must move
mood is still different compared to the last debate, but that had more to do with the very poor performance.
To defund the police. She has a flat plan.
I'm sorry, we're gonna who have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act.
Let's look at the Satan, the sinner. Let's see how he covers it.
Also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much.
Frankly, I'm not going to lie to you. I really don't find it fascinating. The policy on American healthcare, I think, is atrocious. And we're not really going to ever find significant policies that are going to benefit everyday people until we can start balancing the budget and stopping the endless war. So never will you actually have proper healthcare in America, even though it's affordable. And so the fact is, what you have to bank on is us having a strong economy so that you as an American can afford to pay out of your pocket for healthcare, which I'm fine with doing that. And I say that to say that's why I'm skipping this segment on healthcare, because it's always BS. It's always BS. But one thing I will tell you is American healthcare is still the best in the world. This is a fact. That's why Canadians leave their little socialist paradise and come on down to America when they need fast, high quality service. And it'll continue to be the beacon of great healthcare the world over.
Leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have.
One thing I want to state, and this is why I always remind you guys that you want business people in office. You want people who are well traveled and very experienced. I've been around the world, filled up 4 passport books. What I see consistently is that Toyotas are everywhere on earth, Hyundai everywhere, foreign cars everywhere, but American cars, you only find them in some markets. You find that they're not as prevalent in Europe. You find that they're largely absent in Asia. And then you ask yourself, well, why do we let the Europeans and the Asians send their cars here, but they don't let us send our cars there? Wow. And then you look at places like Singapore, which have extraordinary taxes, or you look at a South Africa or India that have huge import taxes on American cars. And you're like, wow, people aren't playing fair
release the exculpating evidence, which resulted in his
But we're not going to let that.
Judge Joe Biden
on that. That should have been known.
Let's
now,
see
let's
what
see
Joe
what else.
Biden is we're talking about.
Oh, the fact that Obamacare was brought up, I mentioned that too, about Senate Majority Leader for the Republican Party. There were a number of other things in here that I think aren't going to do any good. We talked to Chicago Red just the other night, and I don't think Kamala Harris did anything to redeem her position on the illegal immigrants. She's been in charge. She was the border czar. That was an opportunity to put her administrative ability, her executive ability to the test, and she failed miserably. We've got all of these illegals in the country.
Judge have a little bit of thing going on with Kamala. He known her from California, and if you ever seen the clip of him talking about her, basically ripping her a new one, it's really hilarious. Y'all to check it out. I might even play that.
She never mentioned anything about the border.
Never. And
or immigration or the illegal. She didn't talk about it. So,
and the other thing was the moderators did not fact check her on her remarks about Wharton, the Wharton firm. And Trump did talk about, he went with them, talked to them, and they liked this program. So she told an outright lie because they did make a press release about that. And the moderators declined to hold her to account when she said she checked with Goldman Sachs and the Wharton School, and they thought that Trump's plan was absolutely ridiculous. Well, the truth of the matter is the Wharton School issued a report saying they thought the plan was a good one. So he mentioned that, but the moderators didn't put her in check by doing what they did, just interjecting without prompting when they disagreed with him. Let's see what else.
Let me go to these super chats real quick. Diamond Dave, Trump said he saw it on TV. Is this guy 10 years old? Yeah. He could have gave a better answer. He was being too nice. And it's like, you got one debate, one shot. You should have just took her out. And I'm thinking that this whole election is already rigged. Maybe he is going to win, but she wants to save face, and they're saying make it look like it could, it could be close.
Buybacks, and I think that look, we have 5 million assault weapons on the streets of America, and we have 5 million assault weapons on the streets of America. And assault weapons have been designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly. They are weapons of war. And there is no place for them on a civil society, on the streets of a civil society. And it's something I'm so passionate about and so looking forward to being president.
to address. We've got to deal with this.
How mandatory is your gun buyback program?
It's mandatory.
Second Amendment?
The Second Amendment, listen, we're going to have to do it the right way. There's no question about that. But we don't have any, we have to get these guns off the street. But I also, I have faith in the American people to know that, that we want to comply with our laws, and that I know that to be true.
This is one debate, which is crazy. Thank you, H and Gardens. What is this BS about average voters going for Kamala when people are hurting financially under the current administration? That's a good question. Anybody want to take that?
That was probably addressed to me. What I mean by that is that she's pandering to the stuff she's saying, her inability to answer questions, but her ability to engage in the use of excellent word salad is going to appeal to average voters. Average voters are those that, by that I mean those that are not really as politically, I don't want to say politically competent, but as politically inclined,
That's what I think.
that take as in-depth an interest in politics as, for example, the people that are on this very panel. Those type of voters, not necessarily low information voters, but those are voters that she can appeal to with word salad, because most people are not going to take the time to research what she's saying. Most people are going to take what she's saying at face value. The average American is suffering under this administration and has been, but what I'm speaking to is the intellect, the average political intellect of the kinds of Americans she's attempting to appeal to. She's banking on most people's political awareness being at an average or below average level, not their intellect, but just their political awareness.
May I make a remark here? I think that all of what you say is in fact accurate in one sense. However, I think it's going to backfire, because the problem is that it only appeals to, say, the youthful voter who does not really turn out in mass. It's been about 2.4% of them come out since they changed it so that people 18 and above can vote, switching from 21. That occurred in the late 60s as a response to the Vietnam War and people getting drafted. I think that what's going to happen is when people recollect on what they paid the last time they went to the grocery store, dealt with a gas pump, saw their utility bill or other things, or tried to go to a restaurant and seen the prices go up, went to buy something like a pair of socks, some underwear, or clothes or shoes, and seen how drastically the prices have gone up. That kind of voter who has ordinary bills with ordinary income
especially
is
since it
going
was
to take
3 on
what
1.
she said in a very negative fashion.
That's good.
If they are in a
it's not surprising, of course, when you see that ABC News colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign on the Russian collusion hoax and the Trump and the Steele dossier. So, of course,
And Donna Brazile gave Clinton the questions for the debate she was in.
ABC News, of course, killed the Epstein story. I mean, so are you surprised that ABC News was, coming out swinging on that?
Well, and also, just in my opinion, like the way that she answered some of those questions so poignantly, answered the question, you know what I mean? But just how tight she was with her responses, it just, to me, there's no way she did not have those questions ahead of time. Of course. There's no way.
Yeah. Like, here's the questions we're going to give you ahead of time. You know what they're going to be. You know what the hot button issues are going to be.
You watch her, like, when she gets caught off the plane with the media, like on the spot, she can't answer those questions like that. She talks, it's a complete word salad.
Right.
She's talking about her Starbucks cup and lipstick or something.
No, it was a total disgrace for the legacy media. I mean, it really, really was. And again, why is legacy media having these debates anymore? Like, why? Redacted, come on over. Well, let's do a presidential debate right here on Redacted. We'd be thrilled to have it.
Imagine Redacted, Bongino, nice. A couple people like that getting together and saying, we're going to do a stream
that would be
with
awesome.
With 3 moderators, and we're going to ask real questions. It would get more views than anything that these people put out.
Oh, for sure.
It really would, because we don't trust them no more. Nobody trusts them no more. We got like 100 of my favorite content creators right now covering this stuff. It's actually amazing to watch. It's decentralized news. That's what it is. We're all about it over here.
Sure, and I would love to. And X, I would love to have a Twitter debate, an X debate, with Elon Musk as the forum and opening it up in that way, and allow X users to ask questions would be unbelievable. But anyway, that's the legacy media for you. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I think Kamala Harris did what she needed to do, which was look not totally incompetent.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's actually scary how she could transform from being a dumb bimbo to something to be reckoned with. She seemed like a force to be reckoned with tonight, actually. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen because it just looks like it's a draw or something, you know. Trump is taking it easy. They neutered Trump, so I'm not sure, but it's a draw.
Try to stick to her talking points. That's all she needed to do was just regurgitate her talking points that were handed to her.
And her questions were set up just perfectly for her to do that.
Yeah. And I think Trump was, I wish Trump would have spent more time instead of debating, going after the things that were being thrown at him by Kamala Harris and ABC, if he was going to be able to speak more about specific policies in the United States and what needed to be done at the border. How are you going to round up these individuals and get
So
them out?
basically, what that's telling me is we need a whole nother debate because it really did seem kind of surface level. Didn't seem like it went into a whole lot. So yeah, we're probably going to need more debates. But I'm hearing that Kamala is not trying to debate no more, which is unfortunate.
What are you going to do to fix inflation specifically? How are you going to try to undo all of the crisis right now for the U.S. dollar and inflation?
How to unburden what has been,
I would have loved to have heard more about that from Trump. So, all in all, an interesting night. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on Redacted Special Edition. Again, thank you so much for subscribing. We're back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time live. We do the show every day live at 4 p.m. Normally, Natalie joins me, my wife.
I was going to say, I won't be here tomorrow.
No, but he'll be in the background. David, my producer, usually runs things from a different studio, so he'll be there, and Philip as well, and Grim, all behind the scenes. So thank you guys so much for being here and joining us on this special debate edition. Let's see if there's another debate. Right now, this is the only one. Will Fox News get a debate? Who knows? We don't know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for subscribing, whether you're watching us on Rumble, on X, on YouTube. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.
That's where he said it. He was followed up. He's been asked about it in interviews. She was asked about it in her sit down with CNN. And I'll tell you, as a debate moderator, you factor all that in on whether you're going to raise it on the debate stage. Has it already been responded to? Has it already been? How long has the controversy, been over? This would not have risen to the level. It would. Children are actually having their body parts chopped off right now by the Democrats.
Wait, what are we talking
I feel like
about?
that deserved a question. I like little girls are having their faces pummeled and going into permanent brain damage because of boys playing. Maybe they could deserve one question instead of raising this thing over and over again. But here's how they did it. Mr. Trump, you're horrid. Here's what you said. Vice President Kamala Harris, would you like to comment on how terrible he is? That was their MO. Here it is.
Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
That was smooth how he did that.
I mean, honestly, I think it's.
I actually think he got her off her game with that one. Yeah, it was like whatever is clever, Trevor. If you love it, I like it. If you like it, I love it. And I think they had that one in the hat. They was ready for that like dagger to like, like they try to do at that rally. But it didn't work. So yeah.
It's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
I mean, the play.
Except that you're the one calling race into the situation, which is just weird. Hey, what happened to weird? They're not going with that no more?
Book, Rich.
I like Kamala. It sounds like I don't like her, but I do.
It worked beautifully. Who couldn't look good out there with those two moderators doing that for her?
Yeah, that was a classic instance of the dynamic, challenging question to Trump, and then to Kamala. What do you think? About this terrible thing, he said. And so there was about, I don't know, I didn't have a timer on it, but it felt from the initial questions, after the initial questions on the economy, I thought Trump was quite good on that. Then we get abortion, we get January 6th, we get election denial, we get this. It felt like 45 minutes straight. It was on terrain that was not favorable to Donald Trump. And of course, not all terrain is going to be favorable to Donald Trump, and he created some of those problems for himself. But it felt like a very long time. And as you say, none of these things that would challenge Kamala Harris, like the thing that just emerged. Talk about something's new. You said as you pointed out, the answer about the Trump statement about her racial identity is old, but we just had the CNN getting the ACLU scorecard or a questionnaire where she said that she supported the government paying for gender transforming surgery on illegal immigrants in detention is new. Like it broke a day or two ago, right? Did they ask her about that? No.
But Trump said it, but they never clarified. All right, let's go over here to my man Tim Black, man. Tim Black is always good, Let's hear what he got.
Debate tonight. A lot was riding on this debate. I said yesterday that I thought this debate was going to be important because, well, most people already made up their mind who Trump is. I got a feeling that most Americans already know all they could ever know about Trump. I think that was already accomplished with 8 years of coverage. 8 years of coverage, 4 of those years with him not even being in office. But the coverage never stopped. So I don't think Trump was up here to try to win over new people. Not really. I think what this was important, or why this was important, is because it's going to give Kamala Harris an opportunity to be on the world stage, to be out front and then introduce herself to people in a way that these events, no matter how big they say those events are that she holds, but in a way that can never do. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize, I don't care if the stadium holds 20,000 or 30,000, which a lot of the places she was at doesn't hold that many people. But being on that stage, you reached millions. And will continue to reach millions. Okay, because if you count all the views on this one event. So all that, she went on this stump speech and she told him about her policies. Now, tonight was the night, guys. Tonight was the night. And I got to say, I didn't hear much new from Kamala Harris. I'm a very, look, real talk, you guys know I'm a very harsh critic on Kamala Harris. But I'm a harsh critic on anything Democratic Party related. I'm a harsh critic on the system. I'm a harsh critic on the establishment. So I'm a hard-ass sell. You're not going to just get me to... And I realized as I was talking to friends, I realized as I was kind of wrapping my head around what I just saw, there were other people that said, hey, they feel the way they feel about this. They hate both candidates. And I get that. But now I really understand what the differences are here and what's really at stake. See, I hate the system more than I hate Trump. And I didn't understand that a year ago. In fact, that gave people grief sometimes. Right. Because they'd say something similar And I wouldn't even understand what they meant. But as Trump sat there, as he spoke, it became more and more evident that he was against wars.
Yeah, it seems like he's against everything that. It's like it was my father-in-law, you know? No racist, a good dude. Honestly, I can understand Trump. He's a billionaire, common man type guy. He talks to me like somebody at the bus stop, or at the barber shop, or at the bar. I don't understand Kamala, and they don't speak my language. Not to say that they're not speaking good language, but it's just not my language. So
That he was against certain policies that everybody, both Democrats and Republicans, would be for. Get what I'm saying? So that puts him in a weird position. It's not about liking him as a person. Don't know the guy, never met the guy. But I feel like tonight, Kamala did not do enough if I was an independent. And if I wanted something different, I don't think you can just say you're different by saying you're different. I didn't hear anything different. In fact, a lot of what she said, she lifted right off of Biden's playbook. I mean, if I got to hear the whole Trump came down the escalator and the Charlottesville and evil on both sides, and we got to rehash January 6th all over again, all softballs that ABC served up for Kamala to knock out the gate. All softballs. But even with those softballs, man, if I was an independent person, I'd heard all that about Trump. None of that is new. None of that. I don't think any of that was going to move anybody from one side to the other. And if you were undecided, why would hearing the same exact talking points Biden used make you want to choose Kamala? In fact, it was disappointing in that regard. What's the difference? So, let's start with a couple of the highlights, okay? For some reason, I'm closing. I got the ending at the closing. There was a couple of points. I guess I don't got to go chronological. Let's go with this. This is something that sent me, like I wanted to throw something at the screen when she said it. She literally criticized Donald Trump. She trashed him for about 2 minutes. Why? Because he met with the Taliban. She said he met with the Taliban at Camp David. How dare he meet with the Taliban? He's a sucker. He was easily manipulated. He met with the enemy. He even brought them to Camp David.
You know what that's about.
Yada, yada.
That's to try to make it look like he's getting money from them. He's selling out to them. But the Taliban comes to Camp David often, right? I mean, don't they all meet with him? And by the way, don't they all meet with Putin? Didn't Bill Clinton, didn't Obama, didn't Bush meet with Putin? And and Donald Trump was president. So of course he's going to meet with Putin. And why shouldn't he meet with Putin? And why shouldn't he talk to Kim Jong-un or anybody else? I don't see how that's a bad thing. Call me crazy. I just don't see how it's a bad thing to talk to people that could kill us, potentially.
Yada, 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 yada. Now, remember, the point about this is so important, guys, is that the ABC host asked her about the withdrawal from Afghanistan that we did, that was done under the Biden administration, her administration, and was she disappointed in anything? Or was she do it a different way? Or was she happy with the way it was conducted? And she didn't say yes or no. She said, I agree with what we did. So I guess that's saying she agrees with it.
Right, she is.
Innocent people died during that withdrawal. It was hasty.
Yeah, because they had to get to Ukraine.
And lives.
You had to hurry up and get out of there so they could get to Ukraine.
And then she blamed Trump.
And she blamed Trump.
For their pullout of Afghanistan when Trump wasn't in office at the time.
That's literally crazy.
And that's pretty much how all of this went with Kamala. Each time there was a question about her and Biden, it was always blamed on Trump, whether it's job loss, whether it was cost of food, whether it was wars, Ukraine, Afghanistan, everything was Trump's fault.
Right, that's true.
She wouldn't even blame Biden and say, hey, I was only VP, which would be a more honest answer. But instead,
So
it was
you gotta literally
it's Trump's
skip
fault
4
because
years
Trump met with the
to make
Taliban
that
leaders.
logic work.
So when Trump got a chance to talk, he said, look, when I met with them, because Americans were being killed by snipers, and I met with this leader, I think his name was Abdul, and I told him, I showed him a picture of his house, and I said, you should stop what you're doing. And I showed him a picture of his house. He said, why did you show me this? He said, if you don't stop what you're doing, you'll find out why. And he says they negotiated some type of cease where there wasn't another American killed for the next 18 months.
That's true. That is
Now,
true.
I don't know how verifiable that was.
No, it's
she
true.
didn't push back on it. ABC didn't push back on it. But the broader point is, Trump's talking about meeting with somebody to discuss American lives not being lost, and you're questioning where he talked to them at, as if there's a place like Camp David is, I don't know, your bedroom or something. Like, it's not no sanctified place. If Camp David was such a sanctified place, now no American presidents would be allowed to be there, because pretty much, every American president has blood on their hands.
Tom.
Every American president has committed war crimes to some extent, some much more than others. So to me, that kind of crystallized everything. ABC didn't correct her. There was nothing said, and it just went on. But it was like when it was Trump, they would go back, come back again. They kind of fact check him, but they wouldn't fact check her. So I noticed that. Didn't sit right with me. How it's Trump's fault that you couldn't get that you could not pull out of Afghanistan without Americans dying, without leaving guns for the Taliban to take and use. There was a back and forth about the Obamacare, and Trump said, look, Obamacare is too expensive. Now, this also brings up a bigger picture, guys, because this is something I realized about a lot of issues. There are issues that impact regular people that don't impact everyone. I've been guilty of this my damn self. Where I happen to live now, we don't have a lot of illegal immigrants, like populations, and that I know, that I'm aware of, right? I don't know about it. So when I was first looking at the issue, I was somewhat dismissive of it because I hadn't seen it myself. And because we got such a lying media, and because there's so much stuff going around on the internet, I didn't know what was true. I didn't know what was fabricated. But based on my former, more lefty positions on most of everything, thinking that was the kinder, gentler way to be, the more thoughtful way to be, I kind of thought, hey, maybe they're making this all up. Maybe Fox News people are just using this to help Trump or whatever, right? It wasn't until I had people that were watching my show, Black Americans watching my show from cities like Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, that told me, nah, Tim, it's real out here. I remember when I had Dr. Abdul Muhammad on my show, man. He was like, yo, man, I'm a school teacher. We see this every day. This is really going on, Tim. It's not a talking point. So my dumb ass had to apologize because I thought people were spreading Republican talking points. Because that's what I've been fed, that line that everything's a lie and that nothing's wrong and nothing's going on and black people aren't getting pushed to the bottom of the barrel and, that everything's okay. It's just Republicans spinning things up to get an edge. So I had to apologize for that because I didn't know. So then I started digging and I said, wow, yeah. There is a fight for resources. There are people that have been on waiting lists. And then migrants come in and leave